one seat a Democrat. You're running as a Democrat. My question to you is, what's your biggest issue with President Biden's leadership?
The censorship, the war, and putting neocons, war-mongering neocons in front of in charge of our foreign policy, and putting Wall Street in charge of our domestic policy and our economy.
So what would you do differently?
I would do everything differently. I would negotiate with the Russians, which is what they've wanted to do from day one. The Russians signed a peace agreement in March of 2022, which we just found out about, and Zelensky initialed it. And the Russians were actually withdrawing their troops in March of 2022 and April of 2022. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Kiev to blow up that agreement. And since then, 135,000 kids, Ukrainian kids, have died, and 50,000 Russian kids. My son went over to Ukraine and fought in the Kharkiv offensive. He was a machine gunner in a special forces unit. And so, I'm deeply concerned with the welfare of the people in Ukraine. I admire their valor. They died unnecessarily to fulfill an ambition of the United States, which was to use Ukraine in a proxy war with Russia. In fact, when President Biden was asked about what the purpose of the war was, he said regime change in Russia. When Lloyd Austin, his Secretary of Defense, was asked in April 2022, right after they blew up the agreement, why are we in Ukraine? He said to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. That is not about Ukrainian freedom. It is about using Ukraine in a proxy war, in a geopolitical dispute between two great powers.
Are you saying that it's the United States' fault that Russia invaded Ukraine?
No, I'm not. I'm not making any excuse for Vladimir Putin. His invasion was illegal, it was brutal, and he had other options. But did we deliberately provoke the action? Yes, we did. Again and again and again, we would not allow Zelensky to sign the Minsk Accords in 2019. Zelensky ran as the peace candidate. He's a comedian. He's an actor, which I'm not disparaging because that's what my wife does. But he had never been in politics. But he won with 70% of the vote. Why? Because he ran promising that he would sign the Minsk Accords, which were already agreed to by Russia, by France, and by Germany. And then the United States, our White House, went over there and we would not let him sign. If we had let him sign, this war would have never happened and all those kids would be alive today.
So there were two different Minsk Accords, and you've talked in the past about how you would use that as a structure for having peace, but obviously it wasn't able to prevent the war initially. I'm just wondering, why do you think that the Minsk Accords would be able to stop it?
I'm not arguing that the Minsk Accords today would still work. I don't think the Russians would agree to the Minsk Accords today, but the Minsk Accords didn't work before because we wouldn't let them work. The Russians were going to let them work. Germany was going to. France and Zelensky was going to. So they worked for everybody except for the neocons in the White House who wanted this war.
What's your path to peace, sir? What would you do to end this war?
I would negotiate with the Russians.
What would that include? Would you be willing
Well,
to say
I wouldn't tell you. You keep asking me questions that it would be crazy for me to answer. I negotiate for a living. I've settled hundreds of lawsuits. You never tell them what you're going to negotiate for before you negotiate. So I would say my answer to that is strategic ambiguity.
Mr. Kennedy, on Ukraine, other candidates have gone there recently. Can you consider a visit to Ukraine?
Yeah, I would love to go to Ukraine.
Mr. Kennedy, our president says we're closer to nuclear war now than ever before since Kevin was president. Would you support a policy of no first use of nukes?
Yeah, well, I would, but here's the thing. What you're saying is really important because the Russians, we are provoking. Not only have we made the worst geopolitical mistake, which is to push the Russians into an embrace of China, which is the worst geopolitical outcome that we can imagine. We've essentially fueled the creation of BRICS, where 40 nations are now threatening to get off of the dollar as the world reserve currency. If that continues, then, that will make the Great Depression look like a cakewalk for us.